Our story begins in 1820 with the American Colonization Society, or ACS, sending its first group of immigrants to Sherbro Island in Sierra Leone. This was a time when the concept of freedom for African American slaves was still new, and the ACS had a vision to resettle these freed individuals back in Africa. The ACS believed that given the opportunity, these individuals could build a new life in their ancestral homeland. However, like all grand visions, the journey was not without its trials. Sherbro Island, the first stop on this ambitious endeavor, was a challenging environment. The island's harsh conditions proved to be a formidable adversary for the newly arrived immigrants. The unforgiving landscape, coupled with an unfamiliar climate, led to a high death rate among the settlers. Life on Sherbro Island was far from the utopia the ACS had envisioned. Yet, in the face of adversity, the human spirit often reveals its true strength. The survivors of Sherbro Island, despite the hardships they faced, were resolved to build a new life for themselves on the African continent. For them, the journey was far from over. They were allowed to relocate to a safer area temporarily, proving their resilience and determination. This initial journey to Africa was a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. It was not the smooth voyage the ACS had hoped for, but it was a necessary step in their mission. Undeterred by the challenges they faced, the ACS set its sights on a new location, ready to continue their quest to provide a new home for freed African American slaves. Despite the hardships, the survivors were allowed to relocate to a safer area temporarily. The ACS, undeterred, set its sights on a new location. While the survivors regrouped, the ACS dispatched a representative to purchase land farther north up the coast. This was a crucial step in the establishment of what we now know as Liberia. The American Colonization Society, or ACS, was not alone in this endeavor. They enlisted the help of a U.S. naval officer to negotiate with local leaders. Their goal? To secure a strip of coastal land that would serve as a safe haven for the survivors of the ill-fated journey to Sherbro Island. And so, the negotiations began. The U.S. naval officer with his maritime prowess and the ACS representative with his diplomatic skills were able to strike a deal with the local leaders. The strip of coastal land was secured, marking a victory for the ACS and a promising start for the survivors. With the land now officially theirs, the survivors made their way to their new home. They arrived at Cape Mesurado, a place that would soon become a beacon of hope and a symbol of resilience. They immediately began the arduous task of building their settlement from scratch. It was a challenging endeavor, but the survivors were fueled by a determination to establish a community where they could live freely and safely. The settlement gradually took shape. Buildings were erected, roads were laid out, and a sense of community began to flourish. The survivors, who had endured so much, finally had a place they could call home. They decided to honor their journey and their new beginning by naming their settlement. The community was christened Monrovia, a name that reflected their aspirations and their dreams. But the naming didn't stop there. The colony as a whole needed a name, a title that would encapsulate its essence and its purpose. And so, the colony was formally called Liberia, a name that symbolized liberty and freedom. With a new home established, the settlers named their burgeoning community Monrovia, and the colony as a whole was formally called Liberia. This marked the end of the beginning and the start of a new chapter in the history of Liberia. A chapter that would be filled with triumphs, challenges, and enduring resilience. However, even in this new land, disagreements arose over authoritarian policies. As the settlers began establishing their new home, differences in opinion sparked. The bone of contention? The governing rules that some saw as too authoritarian. The very essence of freedom that they sought seemed to be threatened by the very system they were building. The settlers, having survived a long journey and the harsh realities of Sherbro Island, were not about to let their dreams be trampled upon. They voiced their concerns, standing up against policies they believed were too restrictive. The situation was tense, with the possibility of splitting the newly formed community. But even amidst this discord, the settlers understood the importance of unity. They knew they had to find a way to resolve their differences and create a system that respected everyone's rights while maintaining order. So how did they manage this delicate balance? By engaging in dialogue. They came together, each one voicing their concerns and proposing solutions. It was a democratic process, one that took into account the opinions of every settler. The result of this open discourse was a temporary resolution, a compromise that allowed the community to move forward. But this was not a permanent fix. The settlers knew they needed a more structured form of governance to prevent future conflicts. Thus, they took steps to establish a system of local administration, a system that would ensure that their new society functioned smoothly. They also began to codify laws, creating a legal framework that would guide their actions and protect their rights. It was a challenging process, but the settlers were resolute. They were determined to build a society that reflected their ideals of freedom and democracy, a society where disagreements were not a cause for division, but an opportunity for dialogue and growth. Despite the disagreements, the settlers were determined to create a functioning society in their new home. And through their collective efforts, they laid the foundation for what would become the Commonwealth of Liberia. Back in North America, slave states took note of the ACS's efforts and encouraged the formation of their own colonization societies. This move was driven by a complex mix of motivations. Some saw it as a solution to the problem of free blacks in a society built on slavery, while others saw it as a humanitarian project to return those of African descent to what they considered their homeland. As these societies sprang up, they set their sights on Liberia, the new settlement established by the American Colonization Society. Each society established its own colony in Liberia, creating a patchwork of settlements along the coast. This had a profound impact on the existing settlement. The influx of new settlers brought an array of challenges, but also opportunities. The newcomers brought skills, knowledge, and resources that contributed to the development of the young settlement. However, the arrival of these new colonies also sparked tensions. Each society had its own vision for the settlement and its own set of rules. The result was a patchwork of colonies, each operating under its own laws and leadership. This lack of unity made it difficult for the settlement to establish a coherent identity and to deal with external threats. Despite these challenges, the settlers persevered. They recognized that they had more to gain from unity than division. After much negotiation, the colonies decided to merge. This was no small feat. It required compromise and a willingness to set aside differences for the common good. But the settlers were up to the task. The result was the formation of the Commonwealth of Liberia. This new entity brought together the various colonies under a single administration. It marked a significant step forward for the settlement, laying the foundation for the development of a unified, independent nation. These colonies eventually merged to form the Commonwealth of Liberia. This merger was a turning point in the history of Liberia. It set the stage for the struggles and triumphs that were to come. From the ashes of division rose a unified entity, ready to forge its own path in the world. This is the legacy of the colonization societies, a legacy of unity born out of diversity. With the merging of the colonies, the Commonwealth of Liberia was born. A significant step in this new chapter was the adoption of a new constitution. This important document laid the groundwork for governance, law, and order in the Commonwealth. It was designed to provide a structure for the administration and to ensure the rights of the colonists. The Constitution was not the only new introduction to Liberia. A new leadership role was created, the position of a governor. This was a pivotal role, tasked with steering the course of the nascent Commonwealth. The person chosen to shoulder this responsibility was Joseph Jenkins Roberts. This was a notable appointment because Roberts was the first African-American governor of the colony. His leadership was instrumental in shaping the early years of the Commonwealth. Roberts was not just a figurehead, he played a key role in the administration of the Commonwealth. He was responsible for overseeing the implementation of the Constitution, maintaining law and order, and ensuring the smooth running of the colony. His leadership style was characterized by his commitment to the development of Liberia and his determination to make the Commonwealth a success. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Roberts faced a number of challenges during his tenure. The Commonwealth was a new entity, and like any new establishment, it had its fair share of teething problems. There were disagreements to be resolved, policies to be implemented, and a new identity to be forged for the Commonwealth. Despite these challenges, Roberts remained resilient. He was determined to make the Commonwealth of Liberia a success. His leadership saw the colony navigate through these hurdles, laying a solid foundation for the future of Liberia. Under Roberts' leadership, the Commonwealth thrived, albeit with a few hurdles. His tenure marked a significant chapter in the history of Liberia, setting the stage for the journey towards independence. One of these hurdles was the issue of revenue from custom duties. As the Commonwealth of Liberia began to establish itself, The economic backbone of the fledgling nation was heavily reliant on revenue from custom duties. These were essentially taxes imposed on goods as they entered or left the country, a common practice worldwide. But here's where things get a bit tricky. The American Colonization Society, or the ACS, was the entity levying these taxes. The ACS, remember, was the organization that had orchestrated the journey of freed slaves back to Africa, and had been instrumental in the establishment of Liberia. However, the British government, a major world power at the time, refused to recognize the ACS's right to impose these custom duties. They argued that the ACS, as a private organization, did not possess the authority to levy taxes. This was a significant blow to Liberia's economy. The refusal of the British to pay custom duties meant a substantial loss of revenue for the young nation, threatening its economic stability and growth. But this challenge was not met with resignation. Instead, it sparked a fire within the people of Liberia. The refusal of the British government to recognize the ACS's right to levy taxes became a catalyst for change. It ignited discussions about autonomy, sovereignty, and most importantly, economic independence. The people of Liberia began to understand that for their nation to thrive, they needed to be in control of their own fiscal policies. They needed the power to levy taxes and control their own economy. They needed to be independent. This disagreement led to a watershed moment in Liberia's history. This struggle for economic independence was a significant step towards the eventual independence of Liberia, setting the stage for the events that were yet to unfold. In response to the British government's refusal, the colonists took a bold step. This was a step that would forever change the course of history for Liberia. The colonists, many of whom had been born and raised in North America, found themselves at a crossroads. The decision they were about to make was not an easy one, but it was necessary. Faced with the British government's refusal to recognize the American Colonization Society's right to levy custom duties, the colonists knew they had to take matters into their own hands. They knew that their economic independence was being threatened. This was a fight they could not afford to lose. And so, they did what they believed was right. They voted in favor of independence. This was not a decision made lightly. It was a decision born out of a deep desire for self-governance and economic freedom. The implications of this decision were far-reaching. It meant that the Commonwealth of Liberia, a colony established by various societies, was ready to stand on its own. The vote in favor of independence was a clear indication of the colonists' determination to chart their own course. It was a testament to their spirit of resilience and their desire to shape their own destiny. This was a move that would set the stage for the formation of a nation that would be governed by its own people, for its own people. The vote for independence was a defining moment in Liberia's history. It marked the end of colonial rule and the beginning of a new era of self-governance. It was a moment that signaled the birth of a nation that would strive to uphold the principles of democracy, justice, and equality. And so, in 1847, the Commonwealth of Liberia declared its independence, marking a new chapter in its history. This was a historic moment, a moment that would forever be etched in the annals of Liberia's history. It was a moment of triumph, a moment of liberation, a moment of independence. And that, my friends, is the story of Liberia between 1820 and 1847. A tale of trials and triumphs, marked by the American Colonization Society's ambitious journey to Africa. The quest for a safer home led them to Liberia, where they established a settlement, braving the challenges of unfamiliar terrain and internal disagreements. But they found resolution, and with it, the strength to form colonization societies. The Commonwealth of Liberia emerged from these societies, a beacon of hope on the African continent. But the path to economic independence was fraught with struggle. The British government's refusal to recognize the ACS's right to levy custom duties presented a hurdle. Yet they persevered, culminating in a vote for independence that marked a pivotal moment in their history. Join us next time as we delve deeper into the fascinating history of this unique African nation.